Letter 17 by Charles Lamb. Little Queen Street, Night of Deck, 9th, 1796. I am sorry I cannot now relish your poetical present as thoroughly as I feel it deserves, but I do not the less thank Lloyd and you for it. In truth, Coleridge, I am perplexed and at times almost cast down. I am beset with perplexities. The old hag of a wealthy relation who took my aunt off our hands in the beginning of trouble has found out that she is indolent and mulish, I quote her own words, and that her attachment to us is so strong that she can never be happy apart. The lady, with delicate irony, remarks that, if I am not an hypocrite, I shall rejoice to receive her again, and that it will be a means of making me more fond of home to have so dear a friend to come home to. The fact is, she is jealous of my aunt's bestowing any kind recollections on us, while she enjoys the patronage of her roof. She says she finds it inconsistent with her own ease and tranquillity to keep her any longer, and in fine summons me to fetch her home. Now, much as I should rejoice to transplant the poor old creature from the chilling air of such patronage, yet I know how straitened we are already, how unable already to answer any demand which sickness or any extraordinary expense may make. I know this, and all unused as I am to struggle with perplexities, I am somewhat nonplussed, to say no worse. This prevents me from a thorough relish of what Lloyd's kindness and yours have furnished me with. I thank you though from my heart, and feel myself not quite alone in the earth. Before I offer, what alone I have to offer, a few obvious remarks on the poems you sent me, I cannot but notice the odd coincidence of two young men, in one age, carolling their grandmothers. Love, what Lloyd calls the feverish and romantic tie, hath too long domineered over all the charities of home, the dear domestic ties of father, brother, husband. The amiable and benevolent Cowper has a beautiful passage in his Task, some natural and painful reflections on his deceased parents, and Haley's sweet lines to his mother are notoriously the best things he ever wrote. Cowper's lines, some of them, are: how gladly would the man recall to life the boy's neglected sire, a mother too, that softer name perhaps more gladly still might he demand them at the gates of death. I cannot but smile to see my granny so gaily decked forth, though, I think, whoever altered thy praises to her praises, thy honoured memory to her honoured memory, did wrong. They best expressed my feelings. There is a pensive state of recollection, in which the mind is disposed to apostrophize the departed objects of its attachment, and, breaking loose from grammatical precision, changes from the first to the third, and from the third to the first person, just as the random fancy or the feeling directs. Among Lloyd's sonnets, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, and 11th are eminently beautiful. I think him too lavish of his expletives. The do's and dids, when they occur too often, bring a quaintness with them along with their simplicity, or rather air of antiquity, which the patrons of them seem desirous of conveying. The lines on Friday are very pleasing, yet calls itself in pride of infancy woman or man, N.C., affection's tottering troop, are prominent beauties. Another time when my mind were more at ease, I could be more particular in my remarks, and I would postpone them now, only I want some diversion of mind. The Melancholy Man is a charming piece of poetry, only the whys, with submission, are too many, yet the questions are too good to be any of 'em omitted. For those lines of yours, page 18, omitted in magazine, I think the 3 first better retained, the 3 last, which are somewhat simple in the most affronting sense of the word, better omitted. To this my taste directs me, I have no claim to prescribe to you. Their slothful loves and dainty sympathies is an exquisite line, but you knew that when you wrote 'em, and I trifle in pointing such out. 'Tis altogether the sweetest thing to me you ever wrote, 'tis all honey. No wish profaned my overwhelmed heart, blessed hour, it was a luxury to be. I recognize feelings, which I may taste again, if tranquillity has not taken his flight forever, and I will not believe but I shall be happy, very happy again. The next poem to your friend is very beautiful. Need I instance the pretty fancy of the rock's collected tears, or that original line, poured all its healthful greenness on the soul? Let it be, since you ask me, as neighbouring fountains each reflect the whole, though that is somewhat harsh. Indeed, the ending is not so finished as the rest, which if you omit in your forthcoming edition, you will do the volume wrong, and the very binding will cry out. Neither shall you omit the 2 following poems. The hour when we shall meet again is fine fancy, 'tis true, but fancy catering in the service of the feeling, fetching from her stores most splendid banquets to satisfy her. Do not omit it. Your sonnet to the River Otter excludes those equally beautiful lines, which deserve not to be lost, as the tired savage, N.C., and I prefer that copy in your Watchman. I plead for its preference. Another time I may notice more particularly Lloyd's, Southey's, Dermody's sonnets. I shrink from them now. My teasing lot makes me too confused for a clear judgment of things, too selfish for sympathy. And these ill-digested, meaningless remarks I have imposed on myself as a task, to lull reflection, as well as to show you I did not neglect reading your valuable present. Return my acknowledgements to Lloyd. You too appear to be about realizing an Elysium upon earth, and no doubt I shall be happier. Take my best wishes. Remember me most affectionately to Mrs. C. and give little David Hartley, God bless its little heart, a kiss for me. Bring him up to know the meaning of his Christian name and what that name imposed upon him will demand of him. God love you. I write, for one thing, to say that I shall write no more till you send me word where you are, for you are so soon to move. My sister is pretty well, thank God. We think of you very often. God bless you. Continue to be my correspondent, and I will strive to fancy that this world is not all barrenness. The poetical present, as the late Mr. Dykes Campbell pointed out in the Athenaeum, June 13, 1891, consisted of Lloyd's poems on the death of Priscilla Farmer, to which Lamb had contributed The Grandame, and of a little privately printed collection of poems by Coleridge and Lloyd, which they had intended to publish but did not. The pamphlet has completely vanished. In addition to these two works, the poetical present also comprised another privately printed collection, a little pamphlet of 28 sonnets which Coleridge had arranged for the purpose of binding up with those of Bowles. It included 3 of Bowles, 4 of Coleridge's, 4 of Lamb's, 4 of Southey's, and the remainder by Dermody, Lloyd, Charlotte Smith and others. A copy of this pamphlet is preserved in the South Kensington Museum. The poems you sent me. This would be Lloyd's poems on the death of Priscilla Farmer, when Lamb reprinted The Grandame in Coleridge's second edition, 1797, he put back the original text. I now take up Mr. Dykes Campbell's comments on the letter, where it branches off from the Priscilla Farmer volume to the vanished pamphlet of poems by Coleridge and Lloyd. Beginning with Lloyd's Melancholy Man, first printed in the Carlisle volume of 1795, Lamb passes to Coleridge's poem on leaving the honeymoon cottage at Clevedon, altogether the sweetest thing to me. Says Lamb, you ever wrote. The verses had appeared in the monthly magazine 2 months before. That Lamb's counsel was followed to some extent may be gathered from a comparison between the text of the magazine and that of 1797. Once I saw hallowing his Sabbath day by quietness, a wealthy son of commerce saunter by, brisk was citizen. He paused and looked with a pleased sadness and gazed all around, then eyed our cottage and gazed round again and said it was a blessed little place. And we were blessed. Monthly magazine. Once I saw hallowing his Sabbath day by quietness, a wealthy son of commerce saunter by, brisk was citizen. Methought it calmed his thirst of idle gold and made him muse with wiser feelings, for he paused and looked with a pleased sadness and gazed all around, then eyed our cottage and gazed round again, and sighed and said it was a blessed place. And we were blessed. Poems 1797. It will be observed that Coleridge in 1797 inserted some lines which were not in the magazine. They were probably restored from a miscopy Lamb had previously seen, and if Coleridge did not cancel all that Lamb wisely counselled, he certainly drew the sting of the affronting simplicity by removing the word little. The comical ambiguity of the Bristol man's exclamation as first reported could hardly have failed to drive Lamb's dull care away for a moment or two. In the next poem to your friend, Lamb is speaking of Coleridge's lines to Charles Lloyd, those beginning, a mount not wearisome and bare and steep. In the forthcoming edition, the poet improved a little the barely tolerated line, making it read, as neighbouring fountains image each the whole, but did not take Lamb's hint to omit the 5 which closed the poem. Lamb, however, got his way, perhaps took it, when the verses were reprinted in 1803, in the volume he saw through the press for Coleridge. Neither shall you omit the 2 following poems. The hour when we shall meet again is only a fine fancy, 'tis true, but fancy catering in the service of the feeling, fetching from her stores most splendid banquets to satisfy her. Do not omit it. So wrote Lamb of these somewhat slender verses, but his friend had composed them during illness and in absence, and Lamb in his own heart-sickness and loneliness detected the reality which underlay the conventionality of expression. The critic slept, and even when he was awake again in 1803, was fain to let the lines be reprinted with only the concession of their worst couplet. While finely flushing float her kisses meek, like melted rubies o'er my pallid cheek. The second of the 2 following poems was Coleridge's Sonnet to the River Otter. The version then before him excludes, complains Lamb, those equally beautiful lines which deserve not to be lost, as the turd savage and sea, and I prefer the copy in your Watchman. I plead for its preference. This pleading, was not responded to in the way Lamb wanted, but in the appendix to the 1797 volume Coleridge printed the whole of the poem on an autumnal evening, to which the Turd Savage properly belonged. Lloyd's, Southey's, Dermody's sonnets. Lamb here refers to the third portion of the poetical present, the 28 sonnets to be bound up with those of Bowles. Thomas Dermody, 1775–1802, was an Irish poet of squalidly dissolute life. A collection of his verses appeared in 1792.